Welcome to the episode 2 of the podcast. And today we are honored to welcome Dr. Rahul Bhargaje, the Executive Director of Medical Affairs for Emerging Markets at Gilead Sciences. With over 2 decades of experience in medical affairs and pharmaceutical leadership, Dr. Bargaje has been instrumental in enhancing patient access to innovative therapies across South Asia and other emerging markets. His expertise spans virology, immunology, and oncology, and he has a proven track record of fostering successful collaborations among governments, NGOs, and healthcare providers to improve public health outcomes. Today, we delve into his journey, the evolution of medical affairs, and the future of healthcare innovation and patient engagement. So, welcome, Dr. Rahul. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I'm pleased to be a part of this talk.
So, Dr. Rahul, your career spans over 2 decades, in medical affairs and pharmaceutical leadership. So, what were the key decisions or movements that shaped your journey, particularly your transition from medical advisory roles to the leadership positions?
Yeah, so initial year, you always start your career with medical advisor. And now things have changed. You start your career as a MSL. I was a medical advisor for 5 years. And it was an exciting journey where there was so much of learning and there was so much of contribution I could do in terms of science, in terms of providing inputs, in gathering insights from the field. So it was a regular interaction with KOLs in the field and enriching the product managing team with what they can do and how they could get the science to the doctors in a better way. I had aspirations for a leadership position. And then I started thinking that, okay, this is a good time to move. And that's when I thought of switching. And the role came up in Bristol Myers Squibb. It was a leadership role. It was a role to manage a team. And that's how I transitioned from being a medical advisor, which was an individual contributor role, to a people manager. You also manage the budgets, you manage the plans, you inspire the team to get to the goals that are set for the organization.
Right.
And then after spending a few years as a people manager, this amazing opportunity came up in Gilead, where Gilead had come up with a very innovative product, which was a cure for hepatitis C.
Okay.
And what really inspired me and what I really felt amazed about Gilead was their philosophy to get the product at the same time when it was launched in US.
That's
Which is
amazing.
very unlike of other MNCs. And that's where I joined Gilead. And there has been a lot of learning because that was a leadership position in true sense. There was no roadmap. There was no direction. My leaders have given the instructions that you have to launch this product
Okay.
and you have the freedom to make it happen in the country. And that is something which a leader has to do. And leadership, I feel, is more of how you show up. Whenever there is a challenge or wherever there is an opportunity, how is that you show up? And that's where I took up this leadership role in Gilead.
So basically, the whole idea was to launch the drug right along with the other developed markets. So the Indian patients, I believe, were supposed to be the part of the clinical trial at the very same time. Was that the case?
No, that was not the case.
Okay.
And usually Indian patients need to be in the trial for the regulators to give us approval to launch the product. But here in this case, Gilead had a very different strategy. And this has been Gilead's legacy for a long period of time, where they had given their products at the same time when they were launched in US, and it was through voluntary licensing.
Got it.
So Gilead did give voluntary licenses to a number of Indian companies whom they believe have very high standards, and they have US FDA plants which can manufacture the product at a very good standard, a high quality product, and at the same time they could reduce the cost. That was something which we call as voluntary licensing. And during this voluntary licensing, we do the technology transfer to this company so they can manufacture the product exactly the way it's manufactured in Gilead.
Right. And, as you mentioned about the MSLs, yeah, I do remember when I just finished with my MD in pharmacology, it was all about medical advisors, but it's been a few years now. The medical science license with more localized and focused approach towards the KOLs started mushrooming in. So at Gilead Sciences, you focus on making medicines accessible to patients quickly. So, what are some of the most impactful strategies you have implemented to improve patient access, especially in the South Asia?
So along with what the company did of voluntary licensing the product, my responsibility as a medical affairs leader was to do a lot of health system capability building. So I interacted with a lot of state, with the health departments, with academia, and in this collaboration, we did a lot of medical education of the HCPs so that they know the appropriate use of the product. And because the disease was there for a long period of time, but there was no solution in the market. The solution which was available at that time was not a cure, and it has very less, we call it as SVR. The SVR rates were very less. From there to getting an SVR rate of around 95 plus was something which was a transformational thing. And my responsibility was to get that advancements to the HCPs so that they know where to use and how to use so that the patients benefit.
So that must be quite challenging, right? Most of the time, I mean, KOLs, they would require the conventional way of getting the drug into the market. So how you used to convince them when it was about the voluntary licensing?
So it was a joint effort from not only Gilead, but also from these other companies where they had their product approved from the regulators. And
Okay.
our main responsibility was to do a lot of education so that HCPs are aware about the disease, about the complexity of the disease, and how the solution could simplify the entire treatment plan.
So going on to the next question, pharmaceutical companies, they operate in a very commercially driven environment. But, talking about the public health, it actually demands affordable and widespread access. So how do you navigate this balance while ensuring sustainable healthcare solutions?
That's a great question. And I believe that the government of each country, including the government of India, they do this act of balancing between the demand, which is from the people, their needs, and from the patients, and the supply, which is the commercial part of it, which is the pharmaceutical companies who manufacture the drugs. So I think the government is the one who hits the balance between the two. They see to it that the demands of the patients are met, and at the same time the suppliers are able to meet that demand, not in terms only in terms of access, but also make it affordable. So how Gilead contributed to make it possible for the government was we gave the tech transfer or the voluntary licenses to more than one company. So there were more than 10
Smart.
companies who were given these licenses. They compete. So the competition was between them to get the price at a level which was more affordable for the patients. So we saw to it that there is access, but at the same time we saw to it that there is also an affordability part which is taken care of.
That's rightly said. Most of the time, if we see from the layman's perspective, they start criticizing the pharmaceutical companies. There is a lobby that criticizes the government, but I guess striking a right balance between these two with their own interests, that's something zeroes down to where the patient centricity comes in. And
Yes,
absolutely no doubt, because if we actually talk about India, I personally believe that healthcare in India is great. It's very
yes,
affordable, especially
yes.
we are the generic capital of the world. So good to know how the forces work together, finally keeping the patient at the center. Now having worked, extensively in virology, immunology, and oncology, so how do you see these therapeutic areas evolving over the next, say, a decade? And what are the biggest challenges in stakeholder education, particularly in the emerging markets?
So these are all specialized areas, and I say that because they are complex diseases. At the foundational level, for example, virology, it might appear simple, but the disease is so complex that it needs super specialty or at least specialists to take care of this disease. But when it comes to these three therapy areas, I think the science in all these three therapy areas, especially oncology, there is an extensive science that has been generated. A lot of companies who are oncology focused, so they have a very strong pipeline with them, which means that there is an unmet medical need. There is an intention and there is a vision to to have a healthier world, to at least reduce the number of mortality or the burden of the disease, especially oncology in the world.
Now, as the podcast focuses a lot on the medical affairs and you being a leader, so we have seen that medical affairs has transformed significantly, over the years. So what are the biggest shifts you have observed and what future trends do you foresee in the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industry when it comes to MA functions?
So, the big shift that I have seen in the last 2 decades was medical affairs from being a support to the marketing team. So, it was some of them even started calling it as a medico marketing,
Yeah,
and it was a support function. From there, there was a huge shift. Medical affairs was considered in the last decade or so as a third strategic pillar.
that's true.
So there's R&D and there's commercial, and then there is medical affairs in between. Of course, it's also a bridge between the two,
Right.
and it is also an important strategic pillar. So that's a big shift that I have seen of the importance of medical affairs as a strategic pillar. I see a trend of the omni-channel, which has been recently introduced in the West. It's been picked up in our part of the world. It is picking up because understand the attention or the time that an HCP or a KOL has, and we have to make the most out of it. So omni-channel is something that I see is the future, where you see to it that the right content reaches these people at the right time, and most important, the right format.
And with the whole advent of Gen AI and LLMs that are coming up, it would be pretty interesting to see how the gap gets bridged very quickly. Coming on to the public health. So public health advancements often rely on strong partnerships with governments, NGOs, and healthcare providers. So can you share a notable example of a successful collaboration that significantly improved healthcare success or healthcare access?
So we had this collaboration. So, and I would again quote the example of hepatitis C because that is where we had maximum public health, which came into the picture. So our strategy was to go to the high burden states and where the political will is also high. I'd like to share one example of what we did in the space of hepatitis C. We did a collaboration with a patient advocacy group and with the government of Punjab. So what we did is how do we, be more strategic? So we focused on the key population of prison inmates where the disease burden of hepatitis C is the highest. So we chose that population, did a lot of screening, education, linkage to care. And once these patients were linked to the care, the state government, they had procured the medicine from the voluntary licensees.
Okay.
And then they provided medicine to this person. So just to, show the impact that we had, we were able to screen 29,000 approximately prison inmates. All put together, we could screen and get almost 70% of those were found to be HCV RNA positive. So 70% of them, we were able to put them on treatment. So from creating awareness to doing screening to linkage to care and then getting them treated and cured. And this required a lot of efforts. So everyone participated in their own way to make this successful.
This is a very interesting case study that you have shared because it
Yeah.
requires a lot of coordination and multi-stakeholder
Yes.
involvement, and everyone
Yes.
has
Yes.
to be on the same side of the story.
Right.
Now, as we touched upon on the digital aspect or the artificial intelligence aspect or the Gen AI, the way it's coming. So with this rise of digital health and AI-driven tools, how is innovation shaping medical affairs and patient engagement? I mean, are there any initiatives or projects you have led that leverage technology to improve the healthcare delivery?
And this is the way to go. This is the future. When I wanted to do more of a digital health work, the biggest challenge that we face in the country is the data. When you go into West and when you see a lot of real world evidence that has been created, is because of the electronic medical records that they have. So the first and primary thing, which is also an aspiration of the Indian government, is the digital mission to have electronic medical records is the first step. The second step that I would feel is that we need to harmonize these electronic medical records. Otherwise, it so happens that each hospital has their own way of capturing data, and then you cannot scale it up because one of the things, if you want machine learning to happen, if you want some prediction to come out of that data, you need a large amount of data. And
Right.
that could only happen if there is a collaboration between or among a lot of a lot of hospitals, and then you can apply AI to it and get some prediction. And only then I feel that once you get that, it will really help to move from the treatment part of it. Because if you could know that these are the set of patients who could develop the complication, then you can work backwards and then see how you can help these patients so that they they don't move into a complication.
And definitely, I think when we talk about data interoperability, that is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to the real world evidence. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
even the government of India has taken an initiative. They have come up with a particular health card. Of course, it's a very
yes.
nascent stage. Just like we have an Aadhaar number, this particular number that needs to be put up, be it in a government hospital or a private hospital, to connect the
Mm,
dots. So this is quite an ambitious project. It would be interesting to see, how things transpire on that front.
yes, yes. No, everything is possible, is what I believe. It's the scale that India has. It's going to take time, but we will be there.
Now, looking back at your career, what have been your most rewarding moments, both professionally and personally? And what are the biggest leadership lessons you have learned?
So Gilead gave me this opportunity to work with key stakeholders which were beyond um, HCPs. Till that time, HCPs, the KOLs is what our focus used to be in medical affairs. Now I have got this opportunity to work with the health ministry, to meet with bureaucrats. So I also at the same time had this opportunity to work with patient advocacy groups, the NGOs, the community-based organizations, the CBOs, to see very different perspective of a scientist. So we look science from a very data point of view. They look it from a very people point of view. Of
Right.
course, we are patient centric and we try to generate data which is going to help the patient in the long term. But there is also a social factor which is beyond the science. I have gained the confidence to interact with these key stakeholders when I was reading McKinsey report, and they had a 2030 vision which was printed out, and there was a very important quote by one of the leaders that think medical affairs with a goal of how do you improve patient outcomes. So now it has become very clear to me that that is the goal that I should have. That how could I support the HCPs in the clinical decisions making, and how could I see to it that the patient outcome is improved. So that's one important lesson that I have learned. The other important lesson that I have learned is there's so much of science that is coming up. You need to continuously learn.
Yeah.
You need to skill yourself continuously. There are so many ways other than the data. There are so many ways or newer ways of solving the problem. So these are the two lessons. And the third one is ambiguity. I now have learned how to deal with ambiguity because the environment changes so much and the organization for which you work has to adapt to the environment, and you have to adapt to the organization. So it teaches you resilience, it teaches you adaptability, it teaches you flexibility, and just don't get worried about the ambiguity because that is the way it is going to be.
And while we touched upon so many aspects, the way the medical affairs function have evolved with so much of interaction that is happening between the pharma company and the governments, that is something very important. That's quite a learning for me to take away from this podcast. So lastly, if you could share one key message with our listeners about the intersection of public health, innovation, and patient centricity, what would that be? And where do you see the bigger opportunities for transformed change in healthcare access?
So coming to your first question, the message that I would like to give is that continuously think about improvement by innovation, because you have to find newer ways, more efficient ways, more effective ways of making the change to have an impact. The other piece which I feel is very important is collaboration. The bigger the scale of impact that you want to have, bigger should be your collaboration. And this is something that I have learned from the company. It gave me an opportunity to work with the government, which gave me an opportunity with big NGOs.
So right now we can safely say that patient centricity is just not only in the books, it's actually happening out
Yes,
there in reality.
yes, yes, yes. And for access, Amit, I think the thing that could happen is if there is harmonization, what happens is in terms of the regulatory approvals, Now, currently, what is happening, each country needs to have their own approval. If there is some kind of an harmonization, for example, the way we have one rule for Europe when it comes to
Right.
acts, of course, they adapt, each country adapts it and tweaks it a bit based on their needs and based on their constraints. But on a larger scale, if there could be one without borders regulation, then access becomes very easy.
True. Even recently, Europe, they have come up with JCA, joint clinical assessments. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the whole idea behind harmonizing things so that
correct.
it becomes easy or
Yes.
quicker to get the patient access.
Right, because that's our ultimate goal. Of course, we want the whole purpose of that research is to see a healthier patient. And if we can get it as quickly as possible to the patient, that is a fulfilling, that's a meaningful thing that we as humans who work for pharmaceutical companies feel.
With that, I would like to say thank you, Dr. Rahul, for such an insightful discussion. And we hope that you continue your leadership journey and keep on inspiring people.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for having me here, and
Thank,
all the best to you.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.